Skin disorders, a look into the life of acne. But first we must understand the basic makeup of the skin and all of its components.
The skin is made up of three basic layers. The uppermost layer is the epidermis, which is made up of keratinized stratified squamous epithelium. At the epidermis are dead cells at the surface packed with tough protein called keratin. The epidermis lacks blood vessels, so it depends on the diffusion of nutrients from the underlying connective tissue in order to have nutrients. There are also sparse nerve endings for touch and pain. The dermis is where pimples start to form, the layer underneath the epidermis. The dermis contains sebaceous glands or oil glands that produce an oily secretion called sebum. Sebum keeps the skin from becoming dry, but when an excessive amount is produced, it can result in acne. The hypodermis is the innermost layer of the skin and also the thickest layer. It underlies the epidermis and the dermis. The functions of the hypodermis include storing fat, protection, attaching the upper skin layers to underlying tissues such as bones and cartilage, and body temperature regulation and hormone production.
The functions of the skin may be classified as protective, sensory, respiratory, heat regulating, and secretory. The skin protects the body from injuries from without and also acts as a guard against a too rapid loss of liquids and heat from within.
The skin protects the muscles, nerves, and blood vessels from such dangers as might be caused by blows or pressure, as well as from the injurious effects of high and low temperatures. As the skin forms a sensory covering to the body, it conveys the sensations of pressure, temperature, and pain, so that the body may adapt itself to changes in its environment. There are multiple cells that make up the epidermis. There are keratinocytes, melanocytes, dendritic cells, tactile cells, and stem cells. Tactile cells are also known as Merkel cells, and dendritic cells are also known as Langerhans cells. Keratinocytes make up 90% of epidermal cells and migrate from lower levels to higher levels. They are involved in the production of keratin, which helps protect the skin and is a protein formed in the lower levels of the epidermis. They are also found within all of the different layers of the epidermis.
Melanocytes only make up 8% of epidermis cells. They are involved in the production of melanin, which contributes to the skin color.
What determines someone's tan is not the amount of melanocytes that are produced. It is the length of the branches that extend from the melanocytes that determines a person's tan.
Dendritic cells arise from red bone marrow and migrate to the epidermis. These cells act as macrophages to fight against infectious agents.
Tactile cells function as touch receptors in association with the sensory nerve endings found in the skin. They also produce a spiky appearance.
Stem cells are undifferentiated cells that give rise to keratinocytes that is located in the deepest layer of the epidermis, the stratum basale.
The deepest layer of the epidermis is the stratum basale, then the stratum spinosum, then coming the stratum granulosum, stratum lucidum, and then the most superficial layer is the stratum corneum. The stratum basal layer includes all cells of the epidermal cells, including keratinocytes, melanocytes, tactile cells, and the stem cells, except the dendritic cells. Dendritic cells are found in the stratum spinosum and the stratum granulosum. As the cells found in the stratum basale move up through the skin, they flatten and eventually die and shed and turn into keratinized stratified squamous.
The stratum spinosum is the thickest layer of the epidermis. It contains newly formed keratinocytes, which are strengthening proteins. It also contains dendritic cells that help prevent infection.
The stratum granulosum is a layer that contains more keratinocytes that move toward the surface.
The stratum lucidum is a layer that only exists at the palms of the hands and soles of the feet. The stratum corneum is the outermost or top layer of the epidermis. It's made of dead, flat keratinocytes that shed approximately every 2 weeks.
Though acne doesn't affect the body's vital function, it does affect the epidermis and the dermis. Since the epidermis is the outermost or most superficial layer of the skin, you can see acne from here, but the acne actually starts to form at the dermis as mentioned before.
We followed Peggy, a young girl in the 9th grade, just entering high school, and her first day of school was going great, until the first pimple she ever had showed up right in the middle of her forehead. She was devastated. But Peggy was not alone. Her and 60 other million people face this condition called acne, the most common skin disorder in the United States. 10 days later, The pores in Peggy's skin became clogged by oil, dirt, bacteria, and dead skin cells, causing the pimples you see on her face. She began purchasing over-the-counter acne treatments containing the ingredients benzoyl peroxide, salicylic acid, and antibacterial soap. These 3 treatments are intended to cleanse the skin and reduce the risk of infection. 1 month later. It appeared as though these treatments weren't helping Peggy. Her acne was only getting worse. She even resorted to toothpaste, which she read online would help. 1 year later.
The acne filled every pore on her face. She had blackheads, whiteheads, pustules, cysts, papules, and nodules. Her acne was now considered severe. Her self-esteem had plummeted, her confidence destroyed. She felt helpless and was feeling all of the social, psychological, and emotional ramifications that someone with acne would face. Though she was in despair, she decided she was going to do something about the condition of her skin. She started to conduct real research so that she could finally come up with a game plan to get rid of this acne, once and for all. She found that girls typically start to get acne when hormones kick in, from ages 11 to 13. She discovered that stress affects acne, and when someone is under more stress, more oil is produced, resulting in more acne. She also found that diet affects acne, where refined carbs, fried foods, dairy, and chocolate exacerbate her acne, but foods like salmon, red wine, green tea, and colorful fruits and vegetables help to minimize acne.
Here's an interview we conducted with Peggy 2 years later. So how do you feel now, Peggy?
I feel like a completely changed person. Now I don't have acne on my back, my face, my chest, my shoulders, or my feet. Since there were no tests used to diagnose my acne, I almost went to the dermatologist to ask for help. Thankfully, the diet that I used, reducing my stress, and using increased medication actually helped to resolve my acne treatment, as you can see today.